welcome back to Law and Crime Network. We head now to Pike County, Ohio for the trial of George Wagner IV, where both sides have presented their closing arguments in the case. Wow, this was a long trial. Wagner faces more than 20 criminal charges, including 8 counts of aggravated murder for the execution style and deaths of 7 members of the Roden family and Hannah Gilley. Our very own Angenette Levy is live for us today. I cannot get away with just saying the word Angenette Levy without saying our Renaissance lady who does it all at scenes, hosting the show, reporting. Angenette, you're always doing a great job. Crazy case. You followed this. It's a really long trial. Where are we at?
Well, Bob, thanks for that warm introduction. Attorneys for both the defense and the prosecution have wrapped up their closing arguments. Now it's up to Judge Randy Deering to read 150 pages of jury instructions to this jury that will determine whether or not there's enough evidence to convict George Wagner IV of those 8 aggravated murder counts and the conspiracy surrounding this whole case that the prosecution says existed over a child custody dispute. Now, these jurors, it's 9 women, 3 men, and they will start deliberating, we believe, after they hear those jury instructions, but this could take several hours. We want to play a little bit of the defense's closing argument for you. And really, this case is pretty interesting because the defense contends, and George Wagner IV's brother, Jake Wagner, who testified against him, contends that George Wagner never fired a shot that night. George Wagner, of course, says he wasn't even there when these murders were carried out. So let's listen as John Patrick Parker, the lead attorney for George Wagner IV, makes his argument about the testimony of not only Jake Wagner against his brother, but Angela Wagner as well. She also turned state's evidence.
When he was up here, laughing and smiling and smirking as he's talking about these murders, he's cold-blooded. I think he's psychotic. He didn't seem to have a care in the world. It's like sitting around talking about a football game on Monday morning is the way he's talking about killing these people. It's disgusting. He's a sick man. You can't believe what that guy says. And Angela's not a lot better. All right? You know, Angela testified that Hannah was like a daughter to her, right? They lived together. Over there on Peterson Road, she would chit-chat with Hannah at night. The upstairs people, I think is what she was. Where they would be caring for the kids that might wake up in the middle of the night, and they'd sit at the top of the stairs and chit-chat. Maybe like people do in the middle of the night, right? That's her second daughter, and she plots to kill her? Which is exactly what she did. You don't think she'd throw George under the bus if she's plotting to kill Hannah?
And really, you know, the defense's position here is that the state didn't have any evidence against George Wagner IV except for the testimony of his brother Jake and his mother Angela. And they say basically that those two conned the state of Ohio into letting them out of the death penalty in this case in exchange for their testimony implicating not only George but his father Billy. Meanwhile, the prosecution said in its rebuttal case, look, we had a lot of evidence against George Wagner IV, including the fact that he was captured on wiretaps making statements that sounded incriminating, saying things like, I will not cave, I will not crumble, talking to his mother on the phone about that. So let's listen to what the prosecution said in its rebuttal argument about this claim by the defense that there was no other evidence against George except for the statements of his brother and mother.
Is not the state's. He's not our star witness. He's a terrible, terrible human being. He's evil. And he's going to spend the rest of his miserable existence locked in a cage. He's going to spend the rest of his life separated from what means most to him, his family. He will never be free again. And as incredibly distasteful as it was, the state entered into an agreement with Jake for one reason. We needed one thing from him. Guns. That's what we needed from him. Him leading us to those guns was incredibly important. Do you know why? Yes, you saw. When this trial first started, you saw some of it in the questions that they were asking. about the drugs. And there was a lot of emphasis early on when we were doing the scenes about the drugs at the scene. And you heard about it again when Billy talked about Skid Montgomery. The reason we needed those guns was because of the drugs. The Wagner's defense, from the moment they planned this homicide, the Wagner's defense was going to be that the Rodens were killed because of Chris's drug activity.
And there you have it. The prosecution basically saying, look, we made a deal with Jake Wagner because we needed those murder weapons in order to, diffuse or get rid of all of these other defenses that the Wagners were planning. Now, I think we can safely say they also needed Jake Wagner's testimony. He was able to lay out a narrative, whether you believe it or not, a narrative about what he says happened that night, as he claims his brother and his father and him carried out these homicides, his mother involved in the planning, which she also admitted at the trial here in Pike County. Bob?
Angenette, I want to get two facts down in a cross-examination style of you for a second to see if I've got this right. So the state's witnesses who pled guilty and are providing testimony for the government, which we always know you will be cross-examined about your motive, but the defendants negotiated that the trial of the other family members would not result in the death penalty. Is that right?
That was part of Jake Wagner's plea deal. Jake Wagner said, look, I will testify against all of my family members who take their cases to trial if you take the death penalty off the table for them. Jake came in here and testified that he asked for that because he wanted his family members to be able to go to trial without fearing the possibility of death. It's a really unusual thing. I don't think we've ever heard of something like this before in a case. But obviously, Jake Wagner loves his family. He said that on the stand. He loves his brother. He loves his mother. He loves his father. He said it was difficult for him to come in here and testify against his brother. And he wanted to basically save their lives. Obviously, he wanted to save his own life, too. He didn't want to get the death penalty. He knew there was overwhelming evidence of his guilt that would be presented at his trial. So that deal was made. The deal was struck. And he had to basically come in here and testify to the satisfaction of the prosecution in order for those death specifications to be removed from the aggravated murder charges. And that happened last week. The prosecutors made a motion for that. So George Wagner IV, if convicted, is no longer facing the possibility of the death penalty. If he is convicted, he would go through a typical sentencing process here in the court with the judge.
Right. So usually what we hear in these situations, because this is very atypical, that you're cooperating because you want to save yourself. Here, the defense lawyers were able to say, Angenette, let me know if I'm wrong, it's not only save yourself, you're able to save your family, and then in summations, it seems like the prosecutor's kind of trying to walk away from them because we all know in prosecutor world, when you sleep with dogs, sometimes you can catch fleas. Is that the reason why the prosecutor is trying to split that baby here in summation?
You know, that's interesting you bring that up because it kind of felt like that because during the trial, during the testimony part of this, and I'm only laughing because it does sound like that because Jake Wagner came in here and I felt like he was presented as, oh, look, we've got this guy, he's found religion in jail, and he's decided to come clean because that's what he's done his whole life. Even his brother said to him on a wiretap, our whole lives you've gotten us in trouble with your honesty. So they're saying basically, he came in, he told the truth, and I felt like he was kind of held up and portrayed as somebody who, despite carrying out these heinous, awful murders, came in here and told the jury the truth. And his mother was really cast more as the villain, as this manipulator who kind of manipulated her sons into doing this. So now it's like, okay, he's an evil person. This is the first time, yesterday and today was really the first time we heard them say, he's a horrible human being. They called him vile yesterday. And now Andy Wilson's like, he belongs in a cage, he's a monster. But we needed him for the guns. So we want you to believe him and believe what he saying. But at the same time, he's a horrible human being and should never see the light of day again.
Wow.
So it is almost kind of like they are trying to split the baby a little bit.
Ooh, boy, that's a place I don't know. As a prosecutor, I wouldn't feel very comfortable. Angenette Levy, always doing a great job out there in Pike County. You don't even have to ask her a question to know. It's cold and it's windy. Angenette, thanks so much. Okay, and with that, guys.
It is cold and windy. Thanks, Bob.
All right, Angenette, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.